celebrate this giant step forward, AM 560 The Answer is excited to announce our 2020 Back to Business golf outing. It's happening on Monday, July 27th at the Mistwood Golf Club in Romeoville. Come out and golf this spectacular course with Dan Proft, Amy Jacobson, Steve Cortez, and fellow AM 560 listeners and business owners. Foursomes are $1,196, and everyone who purchases a foursome will receive 25 one-minute commercials to air on AM 560 to promote your business. Yeah, so kickstart your back-to-business plans now as Illinois reopens. Go to 560theanswer.com/golf. That's 560theanswer.com/golf. Sponsored in part by Joe Cotton Ford in Carroll Stream and by Remke's Garage.
Get the best sleep of your life. Helix makes personalized mattresses to fit your unique body type and sleep preferences. Go to helixsleep.com and get up to $200 off during their holiday sale.
7:36 Team Hochberg Traffic Center time and Jim.
In Linwood, Sauk Trail is closed between 30 and Burnham Avenue due to a fire. Wilson Road is closed in Volo between 60 and 120 after some flooding. Inbound Kennedy, traffic is clogged up from Harlem to Montrose due to road work in the left lane. Actually, this is the continued overpass demolition at Montrose, which now is expected to take until early Wednesday. It is 32 minutes O'Hare to downtown, outbound 20. Inbound Eisenhower, it's slow going, 25th to 1st Avenue, 35 minutes, 390 to downtown, outbound 41. A crash at 9th Avenue on the right shoulder. Stevenson, 34 minutes, 355 to the drive. Ryan, 21 minutes, 95th to downtown. Bishop Ford, 17 minutes, 80-94 to the merge. I'm Jim Talamonte on AM 560 The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next. From our 1-hour heating and air conditioning weather center, sunny and pleasant today, high 76, currently 58. Next news coming up at 8. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560 The Answer.
Listen to AM 560 The Answer online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, and your Alexa-powered smart speaker, on TuneIn, iHeart, and radio.com. If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560 The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. On starting America anew by taking down all of the statues, maybe eliminating some of the books and artwork.
Just erasing history. That's what they want.
Kirsten Powers, writing in the USA Today, renaming bases and removing statues that honor racist leaders will help America begin anew.
Oh.
Most Americans were reared on whitewashed fairy tales about the United States' history with race. Were we? Gosh, I don't recall that at all, actually, from my K through 12 education.
Mine neither.
I suspect most people of our age and older don't remember that whitewashing that Kirsten Powers is speaking of either. I suggest that maybe from like Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States forward, there's a lot of people who have a complete misunderstanding and much ignorance about American history. You know, from American history through the lens of neo-Marxism. That's what distorts your understanding of America. Not the education I got, because we covered the Civil War and slavery. We covered the Revolutionary War, actually.
We did too.
And all of the contextual circumstances, the Civil War, slavery, Jim Crow,
my school
civil rights movement.
Yeah. But then my school skipped the Japanese internment camps.
Covered that.
Good. I'm glad you did.
In addition to that, by the way, school, the sum total of your learning doesn't happen in the classroom. The good schools turn students into lifelong learners by lighting that flame, to borrow from Yeats, not filling that pail. And so you read something that's part of a syllabus in a history course And then that leads you to read a bunch of other things or to consume content online in a bunch of other areas that were sparked by your introduction to a topic. So Kirsten Powers reject her premise to begin with, and this is a premise of the left too. Fairy tales. We were all coddled and told fairy tales about America. Wrong. No. Her concluding sentence, the reality is moving statues to museums, renaming buildings, and providing historical context to racist art are not the fall of Rome or the end of America. If we take necessary steps, it will be the opposite, a new beginning. You know, I have no particular fealty to Robert E. Lee, for example. And, some of the military bases that were named for Confederate generals were not done so much to lionize them as for the purposes of gathering the necessary political support for funding at the time of their inception. Again, the history that Kirsten Powers and others similarly situated don't understand. I always forget the sort of the political lens to apply, the realpolitik lens. But okay. But VDH, as he often does, has an excellent piece in National Review on the topic, and his point is to say, well, what's the standard? Rather than a rush to do this by mob acclamation, which statues come down or are squirreled away in a museum,
thrown in rivers,
which are given more context in terms of their introduction. I mean, how about like a sensible, thoughtful way to do it? I mean, there's
instead of just spray painting them and tearing them down. A lot of Christopher Columbus statues all across this country were taken down this weekend.
Yeah, that's not the most thoughtful way to do it,
No.
I would suggest. I don't think that's a reach to say that. For more on all of this, we're pleased to be joined by Matt Mayer. He's the president of OpportunityOhio.org and contributor to Spectator USA. Matt, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me, Dan and Amy.
So you wrote a piece about Republicans should be reclaiming their history on civil rights, and particularly with respect to the Civil Rights Act of '64 and the Republican support for that monumental legislation. But speaking of monuments and monumental legislation, more generally, the discussion of history going on right now against the backdrop of the beheading and defacing of statues.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think as you guys were talking about history, right? What we were not taught, frankly, was that it was the Republican Party, the party of Lincoln, right, that fought the Civil War, that after that, under Ulysses S. Grant, really fought aggressively hard for Reconstruction of the South, which led to lots of African Americans being elected to office, including the U.S. Senate, shortly after the Civil War. It was only after the Democrat Party and its people came storming back in the South that we ended up with Jim Crow for 100 years. And then, of course, as you noted, it was Republican support more than Democrat support that passed the Civil Rights Act. Unfortunately, the Republican Party kind of allowed that history to be forgotten and not taught. And so 50 years later, you have African Americans who believe it's the Democrats that are kind of their party rather than the party of Lincoln, the party of Grant, the party that really is what allowed kind of African Americans to escape the bondage of slavery in the shackles of Jim Crow.
And in your article, you talked about progressive mindset betrays African Americans. Can you explain?
Yeah, look, I mean, we've had now 50 years of the progressive, liberal, great society, the approach of the left for minorities in America. And, yes, some African Americans, because of affirmative action and other policies, have gone up, but the vast majority remain in failing schools, in violent communities, in failing areas where poverty is the same. The family actually has broken down more than it did back in 1964 because we incented dads to be kicked out of homes. We incented lots of kids being brought into the family because of welfare and the way it was structured. And so, to me, we've got to kind of get back and fight for the conservative policies that I think will transform the African American community into the community it once was, where family was critical, was a unit, and we'll start seeing the climbing of the economic ladder of success, like everybody does in America when they work hard, stay away from drugs, violence, and alcohol, and remain married. And that has been a recipe that has worked for every type of race or creed since the beginning of America, and I think it can work if we just get the right policies put in place and fix the schools. That the teachers union, which are adamant supporters of the Democratic Party, the teachers union, are broken so that we can get those schools fixed that are failing millions of kids every year.
You write an assessment of Trump's chances to attract the black silent majority in November. And against that backdrop, the Wall Street Journal reporting over the weekend analysis done by the National Bureau of Economic Research that finds that from February to April, the number of active black business owners fell 41%. The first estimates of the early stage effects of COVID-19 on small business owners. And you would think that would be a natural constituency for Trump, but all of these issues are complicated, and the complication for Trump is that, he supported the lockdown policies that were enacted during that time period, and that resulted in that number. So how do you work around that?
Yeah, so I call it the silent minority of the minority, right? I don't think a Republican in my lifetime will get a majority of the African-American vote because there's such an ingrained, erroneous teaching of history. But, last Monday, a poll came out that showed Trump had a 40% approval rating among African Americans. He doesn't need to get half or more to secure the presidency and reelection. He just needs to up his 8% from 2016 to 12 to 15% in key states, and he ends up then making it impossible for the Democrat, for Joe Biden, to find votes to make up those lost votes elsewhere, right? And I think the way for Trump to do that is to talk about the fact that under him, black unemployment went down to record lows, that he has funded historical black colleges in a way few have, that under his economic policies, black businesses were thriving until the Chinese threw out this Wuhan virus that essentially shut down our country. And yes, it was shut down under Trump, but it was something he kind of had to do. So I think there's a way for him to make that pitch. He just has to, I think, do it the right way and be aggressive and not letting the left, as it always does, characterize the right as anti-African American.
Here was Trump at West Point giving a speech to West Point grads, and get your assessment of whether this is a good pivot and, frankly, one that's long overdue.
It was this school that gave us the men and women who fought and won a bloody war to extinguish the evil of slavery. The Army was at the forefront of ending the terrible injustice of segregation.
How's that for a start?
Yeah, I think maybe he's reading my columns, which is great.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's exactly what we need to start doing on the right, and not because it's going to get us votes. I want to be clear, Dan and Amy. This is not about winning an election. This is about changing and transforming the lives of millions of African Americans that have been hit with, the legacy of slavery and Jim Crow and are stuck in a systemic and dysfunctional community that has been run largely by Democrat mayors, Democrat city councils, and Democrat governor states. We've got to go in there and rescue those folks so that they have the same American dream as anybody else, including other African Americans who have escaped that because of things like affirmative action or because they kept the family intact, avoided drugs, alcohol, violence, teen pregnancy. So if we got to fix this for the right reasons, not to get votes. We got to fix this so that we can transform lives. And that's what's critical. And Trump echoes that theme for the next 5 months. I think he can get to 12 to 15% of the vote because he deserves it, not because he's going to win re-election. I want to be clear about that. This is about transforming lives, not winning elections.
How do you think President Trump could use Twitter to his advantage? Because, should he talk about George Floyd being murdered and now Rayshard Brooks, who was fatally shot by Atlanta police over the weekend?
I think he should. Amy, look, the trouble Trump has on Twitter is when he gets engaged in some of the kind of more vitriolic attacks, or he talks about the Buffalo 75-year-old guy that hit his head, and whether that guy was doing something wrong or not, nobody's going to feel that that's a good thing to talk about, a 75-year-old guy cracking his head open because police pushed him down, right? That's where he alienates suburban white women in America, and that was the voting population that hurt him in 2018 in terms of the midterms. So I think he's got to just be a bit less toxic on one side of it and talk more positively and speak more vision-wise in terms of what could happen. Look, he made America great once again. Give him a chance to do it again. MAGA 2.0 kind of thing.
Since you're in Ohio, which once upon a time, not so long ago, was a swing state, at the start of this election cycle, it was one that Democrats were prepared to concede. I wonder what you sense in terms of the landscape in Ohio and how much that's a bellwether for what you're seeing nationally.
I think it's still a bellwether, not so much as Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin will be. But look, because Ohio has, places like Toledo, Akron, Canton, Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati, the large urban centers, you're going to have high levels of African-American voters. Those are very blue places. And so there's the same vote disadvantage that Trump faces or any Republican faces in any state across the country that's viable, right? New York and California are never viable, so forget about them. But where the Democrat, drives up their vote margin and victory by big numbers in the cities, he has to keep that number close enough where then in the suburbs and rural areas, he can make up the vote and surpass them and win those states. And I think Ohio, he's still in a good position in Ohio, but it's going to be tough in those other states I mentioned.
He is Matt Mayer, the president of OpportunityOhio.org and contributor to Spectator USA. Matt, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Hear about the big